I'm Bruce Gordon, author of the book, The Spirit of Attack. After I completed my advanced pilot training in the F-86L at Moody Air Force Base, Georgia in 1958, I was transferred to my first active fighter squadron, the 498th Geiger Tigers in Geiger Field, Spokane, Washington. Here I checked out in the F-102, my first frontline fighter, and I'm getting congratulated on my solo flight by our squadron commander. After a routine checkout in the F-102 in Spokane, I was transferred up to Elmendorf Air Force Base, Alaska. My wife, baby daughter, and I drove up the Alaska Highway. At that time, it was 1,500 miles of gravel and pretty desolate. We arrived in Alaska in the fall, late fall of 1962. Elmendorf Air Force Base is just north of Anchorage, Alaska, and was and remains one of our major northern bases. I was assigned to the 317th Fighter Interceptor Squadron, and it was here that I really learned to fly. Our squadron motto hung over our door as we walked in. Only the spirit of attack, born in a brave heart, will bring success to any fighter aircraft, no matter how highly developed the aircraft may be. Those are the words of Adolf Galland, a famous German ace of World War II. I learned the spirit of attack and named my book, The Spirit of Attack. The 317th was an augmented fighter squadron, about twice the size of a normal fighter squadron. We had about 48 pilots assigned. Our commander, Lieutenant Colonel Joe Rogers, front and center in this picture, held the world speed record, and it still stands for a single-engine aircraft in the F-106 of over 1,500 miles per hour. Colonel Rogers was a great commander. His men loved him, and he had a great team. They taught us the details of radar and our new infrared systems. We learned about electronic countermeasures, electronic countermeasures, what makes the missiles guide. Here we were listening to a briefing on the Russians across the Bering Strait at the bases of Providencia and Anadyr. This F-102 taxiing in shows us the globe, the glass globe just forward of the cockpit was our infrared search and track system. So we had those back in the 1960s. People look at the cockpit and don't think we have good visibility, but actually our visibility was quite good. And what you see in there is a shield that kept the light from reflecting and makes people think that we couldn't see out of it. We sure could. The speed brakes are open. We have a drag chute which we drop after landing. Down underneath the aircraft you can see a little windmill with lots of blades. That was our ram air turbine, our emergency hydraulic system to power our flight controls if we lost hydraulic pressure during flight. Our F-102s carried 6 missiles in a missile bay with very fast-acting doors. We had 3 radar and 3 infrared missiles and could select which ones to use depending on the geometry of the situation. We also carried a nuclear weapon. The AIM-26A was a guided missile with a 25 ton warhead, nuclear warhead, that was a very good missile and had lots of ECCM features, one of the best missiles we could carry. There was also a non-nuclear version of the same missile that I thought was very good. The pilot's radar scope, as shown in the flight manual, shows that we had lots of controls where we could adjust the radar to fight electronic countermeasures, and we had the best electronic countermeasures of the day. I have recreated from memory what the radar scope looked like to the pilot. The F-102 and F-106 radar scopes were quite similar. You can see this double-barred line just a little bit to the left of center. That is what we called the Drizzle Band, and that would sweep left and right, and that was actually showing what your radar was looking at. How many degrees left and right it is shown with this 60, 40, 20, 0, 20, 40, 60 on the scope. The little red dot, which really wasn't red, was the target. The line that goes at an angle is an artificial horizon. So that's the horizon, and because it's at an angle, you just think that you are actually banked to the left and you have a slight climb. The dot there is your steering dot. You want to keep that dot in the center. If it is inside that circle, you have a good probability of killing the target with your missiles. We have selected a 20-mile scope, so the target is about 6 miles out. The larger circle there with the break in it is called the time to go circle, and it has already started to collapse. As it collapses down to meet the smaller circle, at that time you will fire. So this is time for the pilot to squeeze his trigger and try to get that dot as close to the center as possible. The break in the time to go circle, the backwards end of the break, shows your overtake rate. So we're coming in at about 500 knots on this target. I have added labels to each of those so you can get a better view and idea of what all these things were. The actual radar scope would have a lot of ground return and spurious data. So it took skill for the pilot to detect the target and work through electronic countermeasures to lock on and get a kill. Soon after I joined the squadron, I had my hero picture taken. We call it the hero picture because it makes us look good in front of our airplanes. We could send it home to our families and friends, but it had a more serious reason. If we were killed in an accident, they had something to publish in the newspapers. Going out to fly in Alaska, we often faced bad weather. Elmendorf was our home base, and we pulled much of our alert in dispersed bases. Here, 2 pilots are on the way out carrying their flight bags, because they will put those flight bags in the missile bays stuffed around the missiles as they fly out to one of our dispersal bases. Home base at Elmendorf, we would disperse to our base at King Salmon in the southwest, where we could watch the Aleutian Chain, to Galena in the west on the Yukon River, where we watched the western approaches to Alaska, and Eielson up north, where we watched the northern approaches to Alaska. One of my first intercepts of a Russian was from Galena. I was scrambled out as number 2, and we went west and found a Russian had penetrated was on the Bering Sea doing what they would claim would be an ice check to see what the ice conditions in the Bering Sea were. But this Russian, he was flying what was called a crate, but it was like a C-47 Goonie Bird twin propeller plane, and it was down very low on the ice, and I came in to make the intercept, and he saw me coming, and he didn't like my intercept, so he suddenly turned hard into me. I was very low on the ice. I had to pull up sharply and go into afterburner to avoid colliding with him. The most interesting target was the Russian Bear bomber. It had 4 counter-rotating props. So as you can see basically in this picture, each engine had 2 props on it that were counter-rotating. It was a turboprop plane and surprisingly fast for a propeller plane. The Bears were based in Anadyr and Providenia bases in Siberia and would probe our defenses. They were trying to see how long it took us to intercept them, and they also wanted to record our radar transmissions, sort of an ELINT function. One day we had a sky shield exercise. That was when B-52 bombers from our Strategic Air Command attacked Alaska throughout the day, and we would go up and try to intercept the B-52s. They would try all their jamming on us. They could maneuver, and we used everything we could to get our simulated kills on them. It was a lot of hard flying, and at the end of the day, I went home. The exercise was over. I took off my clothes and got into the bathtub and was just settling down when the phone rang and my wife answered. She said, "The squadron wants you down there immediately." I rushed back to the squadron as fast as I could, and the wing commander was in our squadron dressed in his pajamas and slippers. I was absolutely amazed. Something really serious must be happening. He said, "Russian bombers over Alaska. Get a plane and get out there." I grabbed my helmet and parachute and headed out to my assigned plane. Most of our planes had been downloaded, all their missiles taken off because of the exercise. So we had to wait while the missiles were uploaded, while the Russian planes continued right on toward Elmendorf. Our ground radar controllers vectored what fighters we had ahead of the bombers to stop them from getting to Elmendorf. Suddenly the 2 Russian Bears turned hard around and went full speed back toward Providenia. They were calling on their Russian fighters to come out and help them because now they had a whole bunch of F-102s behind them. The Bear was a surprisingly fast airplane, and we weren't able to catch them until they were actually over the Bering Sea and headed into Russian airspace. It was nighttime. All the airplanes turned off their lights. The Russian bombers were going west. The Russian fighters were coming east. We were going west. I think our fighters got on the Russian side of the date line, and the Russians got on our side. It was a really hairy situation, and everyone was afraid of running into someone else in the dark. The word came, turn around and come home. So we did. After analysis, we concluded that the Russians were actually lost and were surprised to find themselves over Alaska with American fighters closing in on them. Galena was an interesting base to fly from, especially in bad weather. You can see from this official photograph, fairly recent, that it was located right on the Yukon River, and there was a 50-foot high dike going around the entire base that we had to cross before getting to a short runway. Not only did we have to cross this 50-foot dike, but they had approach lights on poles on top of the dike to warn us about the dike. You can see our alert hangars, the two buildings closest to the runway where we could have up to 8 F-102s. Once I landed on that ice and snow covered runway and I dared to tap my brakes and I spun around and went down the runway backwards. That was exciting. To land on these short ice and snow covered runways, we used techniques that were in violation of the tech orders and made our safety officers very nervous, but we didn't pay much attention to them anyway. We would come in very low, slow, nose high, and just as we crossed the threshold, we would pull our drag chute handle while we were still in the air so that the drag chute would blossom just about the time our wheels touched the ground. That would get us stopped easier. One day as I was coming in really low and slow with power on, as I was crossing the dike, I felt a slight tick. I didn't know what it was. I deployed my drag chute and landed and taxied in as normally I would. A fire truck followed me into the parking lot. I couldn't understand why a fire truck would follow me. And when I stopped and opened the canopy, the fire truck pulled up and the fire chief got out dressed in his big silver fireproof outfit. And I said, "Hi, Chief. Any problems?" And he said, "Yes. You hit the approach lights." I said, "Who, me?" And I turned around and looked at my wing, and my left tire went psh, and the tire went flat. The approach lights had cut a hole in my tire, but I had landed safely. We would fly north to Eielson, which is near Fairbanks, Alaska, and go by Mount McKinley. It's now been renamed Mount Denali, and there we could watch U-2s and other reconnaissance planes taking off and flying to keep an eye on Russia. We could fly south to King Salmon, past the Valley of 10,000 Smokes, named for all the active volcanoes in the area. At King Salmon, we kept an eye on the Aleutian Chain, although the very farthest out islands of the Aleutian Chains were out of our range, and the Russians used to fly over those islands just to prove they could do it. These and many other stories of my flying the F-106 and my flying the F-100 for 132 combat missions in Vietnam are in my book, The Spirit of Attack. You can buy my book for about $34 at Amazon.com, or if you send $20 to me, cash, check, or PayPal, at 105 Broadbill Court in Georgetown, Kentucky, 40324, I'll send you an autographed copy of my book, Postage Paid.